In the vast expanse of the Andromeda Spiral, where civilizations rise and fall like cosmic tides, there exists a universal truth known to every sentient species: size equals power, and power determines survival. For millennia, the Zephyrian hegemony has ruled with their kilometer-long dreadnoughts, each one a floating city of destruction capable of glassing entire worlds. Their ships are monuments to technological supremacy, feared across 1,000 star systems. But, today, as Admiral Kethvar stares through the crystalline viewport of his flagship, watching sensors struggle to comprehend what approaches through the void, he realizes that everything his species believed about the universe is about to change forever. The human vessel that emerges from the darkness isn't just large, it's impossibly, incomprehensibly massive. A leviathan of metal and purpose that makes their greatest dreadnoughts look like insects buzzing around a sleeping giant. As its shadow falls across their entire fleet, one terrifying question echoes through every alien mind present: what kind of species builds something like this, and why? The answer, they're about to discover, lies not just in humanity's engineering prowess, but in something far more dangerous: their willingness to bring overwhelming force to any problem that threatens those they protect. Today, the galaxy learns that humans don't just fight wars. They end them. The crimson glow of Kepler 442b's twin suns cast long shadows across the mining colony's prefabricated structures, their metal surfaces gleaming like scattered jewels against the rust-colored landscape. Dr. Sarah Chen pressed her palm against the cool transparisteel window of the Geological Survey Station, watching the automated harvesters work tirelessly in the distance. After 3 months on this remote world, she had grown accustomed to the alien beauty of the binary sunset, but tonight something felt different. "Sarah, you need to see this." Dr. Marcus Webb's voice carried an edge of excitement mixed with concern as he hunched over the long-range sensor array. His weathered face, marked by decades of frontier research, was illuminated by the blue glow of multiple displays showing incomprehensible readings. Sarah turned from the window, her breath forming a small cloud in the station's recycled atmosphere. The heating systems had been acting up again, another reminder of how far they were from Earth's comfortable embrace. "What kind of readings are we getting, Marcus?" "That's just it, I'm not sure what we're looking at." Marcus manipulated the holographic display, zooming in on a sector of space roughly 12 light-hours away. The gravitational sensors are picking up massive displacement signatures. "Whatever's out there, it's big. Bigger than anything in our databases." Sarah approached the console, her scientific curiosity overriding the growing knot of unease in her stomach. The hologram showed a three-dimensional representation of local space, with their mining operation marked as a small blue dot. Approximately 12 light-hours away, a cluster of red markers indicated unknown contacts. But what caught her attention wasn't the number of contacts, it was their size. "Marcus, these readings can't be correct. According to this data, some of these objects are over a kilometer in length." "That's what I thought too, but I've run diagnostics 3 times. The sensors are functioning perfectly." Marcus pulled up another display showing spectral analysis data. "Whatever they are, they're not natural. The metallurgical signatures indicate advanced composite materials, and there are energy readings consistent with massive fusion reactors." A chill ran down Sarah's spine that had nothing to do with the faulty heating system. She had spent her career studying the cosmos, always hoping that humanity would one day encounter other intelligent life. But, standing here, staring at evidence that such life not only existed but possessed technology far beyond human capabilities, she felt very small and very alone. "We need to contact Earth immediately," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Marcus was already reaching for the quantum communication array. "I'll patch through to Colonial Command. They'll want to know about this right away." As Marcus initiated the communication sequence, Sarah found herself staring at the sensor readings again. The objects were moving, slowly but deliberately, in a formation that suggested military discipline. Each vessel maintained precise distances from its neighbors, and their trajectory was clearly planned rather than random. "Colonial Command, this is Kepler 442b Mining Station Alpha 7. We have an emergency priority communication for Admiral Harrison." The reply came back several minutes later, distorted by the vast distance but clear enough to understand. "Station Alpha 7, this is Colonial Command. Admiral Harrison is in conference. Please state the nature of your emergency." Sarah stepped forward and activated her authentication codes. This is Dr. Sarah Chen, Chief Xenogeologist for the Kepler expedition. We have confirmed detection of multiple unknown vessels of alien origin. Repeat, we have confirmed first contact with non-human intelligence. The silence that followed seemed to stretch for an eternity. When the response finally came, it was Admiral Harrison himself, his gruff voice carrying clearly across the light years. Dr. Chen, this is Admiral Harrison. I need you to transmit all sensor data immediately and maintain continuous monitoring. How many vessels are we talking about? 17 confirmed contacts, Admiral. All showing advanced propulsion signatures and constructed materials. The largest vessel appears to be approximately 1.2 kilometers in length. Another pause, shorter this time. Dr. Chen, I want you and your team to begin emergency evacuation procedures immediately. Pack only essential data and equipment. The UNS Endeavour will arrive at your location in 6 hours to extract your team. Sarah felt her heart racing. The UNS Endeavour was one of Earth's newest deep space vessels, equipped with experimental slipspace drives and heavy defensive armaments. If Admiral Harrison was dispatching a military vessel, he clearly considered the situation to be more than a simple first contact scenario. Admiral, are we in immediate danger? Unknown, Doctor. But I'm not taking any chances with the first alien contact in human history. Begin evacuation procedures now. Harrison out. As the communication ended, Sarah and Marcus stared at each other in stunned silence. The magnitude of what they had discovered was beginning to sink in. They were no longer alone in the universe, but the visitors didn't seem to be planning a peaceful introduction. Sarah, look at this. Marcus had returned his attention to the sensor array, and his face had gone pale. The alien vessels have changed course. They're heading directly for our position. Sarah rushed to the console and examined the updated readings. The alien formation had indeed altered its trajectory, and their new course would bring them to Kepler 442b in less than 8 hours. More concerning was the fact that they had accelerated significantly, suggesting their propulsion systems were far more advanced than anything humanity possessed. How long until the Endeavour arrives? 6 hours if they maintain maximum velocity. But, Sarah, these aliens will be here 2 hours before that. The implications hit them both simultaneously. They were about to become the first humans to encounter an alien species face-to-face, and they would be completely alone when it happened. Sarah activated the colony's general alarm system, and klaxons began wailing throughout the mining facility. Over the intercom, she addressed the 43 researchers, engineers, and support staff who comprised the entire human presence on Kepler 442b. This is Dr. Chen. All personnel report to the main assembly hall immediately for emergency briefing. This is not a drill. As the team gathered in the prefabricated assembly hall, Sarah could see the confusion and fear in their faces. These were scientists and engineers, not soldiers. They had come to this remote world to study its unique geological formations and extract rare minerals, not to serve as humanity's first ambassadors to an alien species. Ladies and gentlemen, approximately 2 hours ago, we detected a fleet of alien vessels approaching our position. These ships will arrive in approximately 6 hours, 2 hours before our scheduled evacuation. I want everyone to remain calm and begin emergency protocols immediately. The room erupted in a mixture of excited chatter and worried murmurs. Dr. Elizabeth Torres, the mission's chief biologist, raised her hand. Dr. Chen, do we have any indication of their intentions? Are they hostile? We have no information about their intentions, Dr. Torres. However, Admiral Harrison has ordered our immediate evacuation, which suggests Colonial Command is treating this as a potential threat. Chief Engineer Roberts, a burly man who had spent most of his life building colonies on frontier worlds, stood up from the back of the room. Doc, what kind of firepower are we talking about? Because if these aliens are hostile, we've got mining charges and industrial equipment, but nothing that would stop a military force. Sarah had been dreading that question. The mining colony had no defensive capabilities beyond basic meteor defense systems. If the aliens proved hostile, there would be nothing the colonists could do to protect themselves. We have no defensive options, Chief Roberts. Our only priority is to secure all research data and prepare for immediate evacuation when the Endeavour arrives. Over the next few hours, the colonists worked with desperate efficiency to pack their most critical research and personal belongings. The geological surveys represented 3 months of intensive work studying Kepler 442b's unique mineral compositions, and the loss of that data would set human understanding of the planet back by years. Marcus remained at the sensor station, providing regular updates on the approaching alien fleet. Sarah, they've maintained their course and speed. Arrival in 90 minutes. Sarah was in the process of downloading the complete geological database onto portable storage when the sensor alarms began shrieking with new urgency. Marcus, what's happening? New contact. Massive energy signature appearing at the edge of the system. Marcus was frantically adjusting sensor parameters, trying to make sense of the readings. Sarah, this is impossible. The new contact is showing as a single vessel, but it's registering at over 15 kilometers in length. Sarah dropped what she was doing and rushed to the sensor station. A holographic display now showed a new marker at the very edge of the Kepler 442 system, roughly 40 light-hours away. But this marker was different from the others. Where the alien fleet showed as cluster of small red dots, this new contact appeared as a massive elongated shape that dwarfed everything else on the display. Marcus, is this reading accurate? 15 kilometers? I've checked and double-checked. If these sensors are correct, we're looking at something the size of a small city. As they watched, the massive new contact began moving toward the inner system at a velocity that seemed impossible for something so large. The energy signatures indicated propulsion systems that operated on principles beyond human understanding. Sarah, I'm picking up communication signals. The new vessel is broadcasting on multiple frequencies. Sarah activated the communication array and began scanning through the transmission frequencies. Most of the signals were incomprehensible, clearly alien in origin. But then, she found something that made her heart skip a beat. Marcus, listen to this. The speakers crackled to life, and through the static came a voice speaking perfect English with a slight British accent. This is Captain James Morrison of the United Earthship Reezes, responding to distress signal from Kepler 442b mining station. All alien vessels in this system, you are ordered to withdraw immediately or face the consequences. Sarah and Marcus stared at each other in shock. The massive vessel wasn't alien at all, it was human. But how was that possible? Humanity didn't possess the technology to build anything approaching that size, and the UNS Reezes wasn't listed in any colonial database. Dr. Chen, this is Captain Morrison. Please respond if you are receiving this transmission. Sarah activated the communication array with trembling hands. Captain Morrison, this is Dr. Sarah Chen of Kepler Mining Station Alpha 7. Captain, how is it possible that you're here? Our records don't show any human vessels of that size or capability. The reply came back immediately, as if the massive vessel was somehow much closer than the sensors indicated. Dr. Chen, I'm afraid the explanation for our presence here is classified at the highest levels. What I can tell you is that you and your people are now under the protection of the United Earth Defense Force. Please maintain your current position and await further instructions. As Sarah tried to process this information, Marcus grabbed her arm and pointed at the sensor display. The alien fleet had detected the appearance of the human vessel and had altered course once again. But instead of continuing toward the mining colony, they were now heading directly toward the UNS Reezes. Captain Morrison, the alien fleet has changed course and is heading toward your position. There are 17 vessels, with the largest measuring over a kilometer in length. Captain Morrison's response carried a tone of grim satisfaction. Understood, Dr. Chen. Please observe radio silence from this point forward and monitor on emergency frequencies only. You are about to witness something that will change humanity's place in the galaxy forever. As Sarah watched the sensor display, she realized that she and her team were about to become witnesses to the first military engagement between human and alien forces. The mining colony's sensors provided a front-row seat to what would surely become one of the most significant moments in human history. The alien fleet continued its approach toward the massive human vessel, their formation tight and disciplined. Whatever species had built those ships, they clearly possessed advanced military doctrine and weren't intimidated by the size of their opposition. But, as Sarah continued to monitor the sensors, she noticed something that filled her with a mixture of awe and terror. The UNS Reezes wasn't running or preparing for defensive action. Instead, the massive vessel was accelerating directly toward the alien fleet, as if 15 kilometers of human engineering was planning to take on 17 alien warships in direct combat. "Marcus," Sarah whispered, her voice filled with wonder and fear, "what have we humans built out there?" Admiral Kethvar of the Zephyrian hegemony stood at the center of the command nexus aboard his flagship, the Sovereign's Wrath, his forearms crossed in a gesture of controlled irritation. His chitinous exoskeleton gleamed under the bioluminescent panels that provided light throughout the vessel, and his compound eyes reflected the holographic displays that surrounded him with tactical information. For 3 centuries, he had served the hegemony's expansion into new territories, and, in all that time, he had never encountered a species foolish enough to challenge Zephyrian supremacy. Fleet Commander, his tactical officer, Sub-Admiral Vextar, approached with the cautious gait that all subordinates adopted in Kethvar's presence. "The primitive colony world shows no significant defensive capabilities. Our preliminary scans confirm minimal technological development. Population appears to be approximately 40 biological entities." Kethvar's mandibles clicked together in what passed for satisfaction among his species. "Excellent. Begin standard territorial claiming protocols. I want bioform samples from the colonists and complete technological analysis of their equipment. The hegemony's Xenobiology division will be interested in studying this new species." The Zephyrian fleet consisted of 17 vessels, ranging from the massive 1.2-kilometer flagship down to smaller escort corvettes measuring a mere 400 meters in length. Each ship represented centuries of technological advancement and military doctrine refined through countless conquests. The hegemony's expansion across the galaxy had been methodical and unstoppable, with their superior technology and ruthless efficiency overwhelming every species they encountered. Admiral, the communications officer, a younger Zephyrian whose carapace still showed the green tint of recent molting, turned from his station with obvious confusion. "I am detecting unusual energy signatures at the edge of this system. The readings are unprecedented." Kethvar's head swiveled toward the communications station, his compound eyes focusing on the displays with predatory intensity. "Define unusual," Communications Officer Zekinael. "Sir, the gravitational displacement readings suggest a single massive object, but the scale appears to be beyond our reference parameters. The computer systems are having difficulty processing the sensor data." Sub-Admiral Vextar moved to review the sensor readings, his own expertise in xenotechnology making him the natural choice to analyze unknown contacts. After several minutes of studying the data, he approached Admiral Kethvar with obvious uncertainty. "Admiral, if these readings are accurate, we are detecting a single vessel measuring approximately 15 kilometers in length. The energy signatures indicate propulsion systems that operate on principles unknown to our science." Kethvar's mandibles stopped clicking entirely, a sign of genuine surprise that few subordinates had ever witnessed. In 3 centuries of military service, he had encountered vessels ranging from primitive chemical rockets to advanced antimatter-driven warships, but nothing approaching the scale suggested by these readings. 15 kilometers? Communications Officer Zekinael, confirm these readings immediately. I want a full spectrum analysis of this contact. Confirmed, Admiral. The object is maintaining position at the system's edge, but energy readings suggest it is capable of significant acceleration. I am also detecting electromagnetic radiation patterns consistent with active sensor sweeps. The tactical implications were immediately clear to everyone in the command nexus. Any species capable of constructing vessels of such enormous size would possess technology far beyond current Zephyrian capabilities. More concerning was the possibility that this massive vessel represented a military threat rather than a simple exploration ship. "Admiral," the navigation officer reported from his position, "the unknown vessel has begun moving toward the inner system. Velocity is increasing beyond our maximum sustainable speeds." Kethvar watched the tactical display as the massive contact began accelerating toward their position. His military experience told him that any species investing resources in vessels of such scale would not be deterred by standard hegemony intimidation tactics. This first contact situation was rapidly evolving into something far more dangerous than a simple territorial acquisition. Fleet Commander, Sub-Admiral Vextar said quietly, "Perhaps we should consider withdrawing from this system until we can assess the capabilities of this unknown vessel." Before Admiral Kethvar could respond, Communications Officer Zekanael turned from his station with obvious alarm. "Admiral, I am receiving transmission signals from the unknown vessel. The communications are being broadcast on multiple frequencies using electromagnetic radiation patterns. Can you decode the transmissions?" "Negative, Admiral. The linguistic patterns are completely unknown, but the mathematical foundations suggest advanced understanding of physics and engineering. However, there is something else. The vessel is broadcasting what appears to be identification codes consistent with the primitive colonists we detected earlier." The implications hit Admiral Kethvar like a physical blow. The massive vessel wasn't from an unknown alien species, it belonged to the same primitive colonists they had planned to easily subjugate. Somehow, the species that appeared to possess minimal technological development had constructed a warship that dwarfed the largest vessels in the Zephyrian fleet. Navigation, alter course to intercept the unknown vessel. I want to know what we're dealing with before we proceed with territorial claiming operations. As the Zephyrian fleet changed course, Admiral Kethvar found himself facing a situation unlike anything in his extensive military career. The tactical advantage that Zephyrian technology had provided for centuries was now in question, and he was operating without any reference point for dealing with a species capable of such massive engineering projects. "Admiral," Communications Officer Zekanael reported, "I am now detecting additional transmissions from the unknown vessel. These appear to be directed specifically at our fleet. Can you determine the content of these transmissions?" "Negative, Admiral, but the transmission patterns suggest they may be attempting to establish communication protocols." Admiral Kethvar considered his options carefully. Standard hegemony doctrine called for immediate subjugation of inferior species, but the massive vessel approaching his fleet could hardly be considered inferior. At the same time, showing any sign of weakness or uncertainty would violate everything he had been trained to believe about Zephyrian supremacy. Communications Officer Zekanael, broadcast standard territorial claiming proclamation on all frequencies. Make it clear that this system now belongs to the Zephyrian hegemony and that any resistance will be met with overwhelming force. As Zekanael began transmitting the hegemony's standard first contact message, Admiral Kethvar couldn't shake the feeling that he was making a terrible mistake. The unknown vessel continued its approach, showing no signs of altering course in response to Zephyrian demands. More concerning was the fact that detailed sensor analysis was beginning to reveal the true scope of the massive ship's capabilities. "Admiral," Sub-Admiral Vextar reported after reviewing the latest sensor data, "weapons analysis of the unknown vessel is showing energy signatures consistent with advanced particle beam systems. The power generation capabilities appear to exceed our entire fleet's combined output by a factor of 50. The command nexus fell silent as the implications of this information sank in. The Zephyrian fleet's most powerful weapons were plasma cannons capable of devastating entire cities, but they required enormous power generation systems that limited the number that could be mounted on any single vessel. A ship capable of generating 50 times their fleet's combined power output could potentially mount weapon systems beyond anything in Zephyrian military doctrine." Fleet Commander, Navigation Officer reported, "The unknown vessel has accelerated to within weapons range. They are maintaining an intercept course despite our territorial claiming broadcast." Admiral Kethvar studied the tactical display, watching as the massive human vessel continued its steady approach toward his fleet. His 3 centuries of military experience told him that any species willing to approach a Zephyrian fleet without responding to territorial claims was either supremely confident in their capabilities or completely ignorant of the hegemony's military reputation. "Admiral," Communications Officer Zekanael turned from his station with obvious concern, "I am receiving new transmissions from the unknown vessel. The patterns have changed significantly, and the mathematical foundations suggest these may be targeting protocols rather than communication attempts." The realization that the massive vessel might be preparing for combat rather than negotiation sent a wave of unease through the command nexus. Admiral Kethvar had led the Zephyrian fleet through dozens of territorial acquisitions, but those had always involved species with inferior technology who were quickly overwhelmed by superior firepower. This situation was fundamentally different. Tactical Officer, prepare the fleet for potential combat operations. I want all vessels at maximum readiness, but do not target the unknown vessel unless they demonstrate hostile intent. As the fleet prepared for potential combat, Admiral Kethvar found himself questioning assumptions that had guided his entire military career. The Zephyrian hegemony's expansion had been based on the principle that superior technology and ruthless efficiency would overwhelm any resistance. But the massive vessel approaching his fleet suggested that technological superiority might not belong to the hegemony after all. Sub-Admiral Vextar approached with additional sensor analysis. Detailed scanning of the unknown vessel is revealing architectural features consistent with military design. The hull configuration suggests heavy armor plating, and I am detecting what appear to be multiple weapon emplacements along the vessel's length. How many weapon emplacements? Sir, the vessel appears to mount several thousand individual weapon systems, ranging from small defensive systems to massive installations that our computers cannot properly classify. Admiral Kethvar felt his exoskeleton tightening involuntarily as the scope of what they were facing became clear. The massive human vessel wasn't just large, it was specifically designed for combat on a scale that made the Zephyrian fleet look like a minor patrol group. Fleet Commander, Communications Officer Zekinael reported with obvious alarm, the unknown vessel is now broadcasting on frequencies specifically chosen to match our communication systems. They appear to have analyzed our earlier territorial claiming broadcast and adapted their communication protocols accordingly. Can you decode the new transmissions? Partially, Admiral. The mathematical foundations suggest they are demanding our withdrawal from this system. The linguistic patterns indicate they consider the primitive colonists to be under their protection. Admiral Kethvar realized that the situation had evolved far beyond a simple territorial acquisition. The massive vessel represented a species capable of matching or exceeding Zephyrian technology, and they were clearly prepared to defend what they considered to be their territory. For the first time in his military career, he was facing an opponent that might be superior to the hegemony's forces. Navigation, reduce velocity and maintain current distance from the unknown vessel. Tactical Officer, keep all weapon systems powered but do not lock targeting systems. I need time to assess our options. As Admiral Kethvar contemplated his next move, he couldn't ignore the growing realization that the Zephyrian hegemony's centuries of unchallenged expansion might be coming to an end. The massive human vessel represented something entirely new in his experience, a species that possessed both the technological capability and apparent willingness to challenge hegemony supremacy. Sub-Admiral Vextar said quietly, perhaps we should consider opening communication channels with this species. Our military doctrine assumes technological superiority, but these readings suggest we may be facing an equal or superior force. Before Admiral Kethvar could respond, every alarm system in the command nexus began shrieking simultaneously. The tactical display showed the massive human vessel had suddenly accelerated to impossible speeds, closing the distance to the Zephyrian fleet in a matter of minutes rather than hours. Admiral! Navigation Officer shouted over the alarms, the unknown vessel is now within close range and continuing to accelerate directly toward our position. Admiral Kethvar stared at the tactical display in disbelief. The massive vessel was approaching his fleet at velocities that should have been impossible for something of such enormous size, and it showed no signs of altering course to avoid collision. Evasive maneuvers. All vessels scatter and assume defensive positions. As the Zephyrian fleet began emergency evasive maneuvers, Admiral Kethvar realized that he was about to discover exactly what kind of species humanity really was. The massive vessel approaching his fleet represented more than just superior technology, it represented a completely different approach to interstellar conflict, one that relied on overwhelming force rather than tactical finesse. Standing in his command nexus, surrounded by displays showing the approaching human Leviathan, Admiral Kethvar understood that everything he thought he knew about warfare in the galaxy was about to change forever. Captain James Morrison stood on the bridge of the UNS Reezes, his hands clasped behind his back as he studied the holographic tactical display floating before him. At 54 years old, he carried himself with the quiet confidence of someone who had spent 3 decades serving humanity's most classified military operations. His withered face bore the subtle signs of prolonged space service, and his gray eyes held the steady focus of a man accustomed to making decisions that affected the survival of entire worlds. Captain, Commander Sarah Williams, his executive officer, approached from the communications station.
We've received confirmation from Colonial Command.
The mining colony has been classified as critical infrastructure, and we are authorized to use any necessary force to protect human interests. Morrison nodded without taking his eyes off the tactical display. The 17 alien vessels showed in red, maintaining their approach course toward Kepler 442b despite the Reezes' presence. Each enemy ship represented unknown capabilities and, potentially hostile intentions, but Morrison had faced impossible odds before. The difference was that this time, humanity's survival might depend on the outcome.
Commander Williams, signal all departments to bring us to combat condition Alpha.
I want every system online and ready for immediate action.
Aye, Captain. Combat condition Alpha throughout the ship. The bridge of the Reezes transformed as combat stations activated and additional personnel took their positions at tactical consoles.
The massive vessel's bridge was designed to coordinate warfare on an unprecedented scale, with holographic displays showing every aspect of the ship's 15-kilometer length and the positions of its thousands of weapon systems. Morrison had commanded the Reezes for 8 years, ever since the completion of humanity's most ambitious military project. The ship represented decades of technological development and resource allocation that had been kept secret from the general population. Built in the hidden shipyards beyond Pluto, the Reezes was designed for a single purpose: to ensure that humanity would never again be vulnerable to threats beyond Earth.
Tactical Officer Chen, Morrison called to the weapons control station. What's our analysis of the alien fleet?
Lieutenant Commander Chen, a compact woman whose expertise in xenotechnology had earned her assignment to humanity's most classified vessel, turned from her console with a mix of professional excitement and concern. Captain, we're looking at 17 vessels ranging from 400 meters to 1.2 kilometers in length. Their propulsion systems appear to be based on controlled antimatter reactions, which suggests a technological level roughly equivalent to our own pre-Reezes capabilities.
Weapons analysis?
Sir, each vessel mounts what appear to be plasma-based energy weapons, probably capable of planetary bombardment. The largest vessel shows approximately 40 individual weapon emplacements, with power generation sufficient to maintain sustained fire for extended periods.
Morrison considered this information carefully.
The alien fleet possessed respectable firepower and clearly represented a sophisticated military force. Under normal circumstances, 17 well-armed vessels would pose a significant threat to any human installation.
But the Reezes wasn't operating under normal circumstances. Commander Williams, open a channel to the alien fleet on all frequencies. Channel open, Captain.
Morrison stepped forward, his voice carrying the authority of someone speaking not just for his ship, but for all of humanity. Alien vessels, this is Captain James Morrison of the United Earthship Reezes.
You are approaching human territorial space without permission.
Alter your course immediately and withdraw from this system, or you will be considered hostile and dealt with accordingly. The response came back several minutes later, transmitted on multiple frequencies using mathematical principles that the Reezes' communication systems had no difficulty interpreting. The alien voice carried a harsh, clicking quality that suggested a fundamentally different vocal structure, but the translation software provided real-time conversion.
Human vessel, this is Admiral Kethvar of the Zephyrian Hegemony. This system has been claimed for the hegemony under standard territorial acquisition protocols.
Your primitive colonists will be relocated for study, and your technology will be analyzed for potential value. You will not interfere with these operations.
Morrison felt his jaw tighten as the implications of the alien message sank in.
These weren't explorers or diplomats, they were conquerors who viewed humanity as a primitive species to be studied and subjugated. The casual dismissal of human sovereignty and the reference to relocating colonists for study suggested a species with no concept of negotiation or peaceful coexistence.
Tactical Officer Chen, bring all weapons systems online. Target the alien flagship first, then distribute targeting solutions across their entire fleet. Aye, Captain. All weapons systems coming online now. Throughout the massive length of the Reezes, thousands of weapon systems began activating with mechanical precision. Plasma cannons capable of melting through planetary crust swiveled toward their targets, while missile tubes loaded with antimatter warheads prepared for rapid deployment. The ship's main guns, massive particle beam weapons that ran nearly the full length of the vessel, began charging their capacitor banks with enough energy to crack continents.
Captain, Commander Williams reported from her station, all departments report ready for combat operations.
Engineering confirms all reactors are operating at maximum efficiency, and our defensive systems are fully active.
Morrison nodded, then activated the ship-wide communication system. Throughout the Reezes' 15 kilometers of corridors, research facilities, manufacturing centers, and crew quarters, his voice reached the 47,000 personnel who called the massive vessel home.
This is the captain.
As many of you know, we are currently facing humanity's first contact with an alien species. Unfortunately, these aliens have declared their intention to subjugate our colonists and treat humanity as a primitive species worthy only of study.
This is unacceptable.
Morrison paused, knowing that his next words would be remembered for generations. The Reezes was built to ensure that humanity would never be vulnerable to external threats. Today, we fulfill that purpose.
All personnel, prepare for combat operations.
As Morrison ended the ship-wide announcement, Lieutenant Commander Chen reported from the tactical station. Captain, the alien fleet has altered course and is now approaching our position directly. They appear to be preparing for combat operations.
Range to target?
50,000 kilometers and closing, Captain. They'll be within optimal weapons range in 12 minutes.
Morrison studied the tactical display, watching as the alien fleet maintained its steady approach.
Their formation was disciplined and showed clear military training, but their tactics suggested they were accustomed to facing inferior opponents. The aliens were approaching directly, apparently confident that their combined firepower would overwhelm any resistance.
Commander Williams, signal Colonial Command that we are engaging alien forces in defense of human territory.
Request that the historical record show that humanity's first interstellar war began when we refused to allow our people to be subjugated. Transmission sent, Captain. As the distance to the alien fleet continued to decrease, Morrison found himself reflecting on the path that had brought humanity to this moment. The Reezes project had begun 30 years earlier, when deep space monitoring stations detected evidence of advanced civilizations in nearby star systems. Humanity's leaders had realized that Earth's discovery by alien species was inevitable, and they had made the decision to ensure that humanity would be prepared for any eventuality. The construction of the Reezes had required resources equivalent to the gross domestic product of entire nations, with advanced manufacturing facilities built throughout the outer solar system to avoid detection. The ship incorporated every advancement in human technology, from quantum computers to artificial gravity generators to weapons systems that could sterilize entire star systems if necessary. Captain, Lieutenant Commander Chen reported, the alien flagship is transmitting again.
Put it through. Admiral Kefvar's translated voice carried a tone of irritation mixed with what might have been concern.
Human vessel, your ship's dimensions suggest advanced engineering capabilities, but you are still outnumbered 17-1. Withdraw now, and the hegemony will consider incorporating your species into our territorial structure rather than relocating you for study.
Morrison couldn't help but smile grimly at the alien admiral's offer.
The Zephyrians clearly recognized that the Reezes represented a significant threat, but they still assumed that numerical superiority would guarantee victory. They had no understanding of how humans approached warfare when their survival was at stake.
Admiral Kefvar, this is Captain Morrison.
I have a counter-proposal. Withdraw your fleet immediately, and humanity will consider allowing your species to maintain their current territorial holdings rather than reducing them to cosmic debris.
The silence that followed Morrison's response stretched for several minutes.
When Admiral Kefvar finally replied, his voice carried a tone of genuine shock.
Human Captain, are you suggesting that your single vessel can defeat our entire fleet?
Admiral, I'm not suggesting anything.
I'm stating a fact. You have one final opportunity to withdraw peacefully.
After that, you'll discover what happens when someone threatens human civilians. Morrison cut the communication channel and turned to his tactical officer.
Lieutenant Commander Chen, prepare for immediate engagement. Target their flagship first. I want to send a clear message about human capabilities.
Targeting solutions locked, Captain.
All weapons systems report ready. Commander Williams, bring us to maximum acceleration.
I want to close the distance as quickly as possible.
Aye, Captain.
All ahead flank speed.
The Reezes began accelerating toward the alien fleet with surprising agility for such a massive vessel. The ship's advanced propulsion systems allowed it to maneuver like a much smaller craft while maintaining the structural integrity necessary to support its enormous weapons systems. Captain, Lieutenant Commander Chen reported, the alien fleet is taking evasive action and spreading their formation. They appear to be preparing for defensive operations. Morrison watched the tactical display as the Zephyrian vessels began scattering in response to the Reezes' approach. Their tactics suggested experienced military leadership, but they were operating under the assumption that they faced a conventional opponent. The aliens had no reference point for dealing with humanity's approach to overwhelming force. Range to target? 20,000 kilometers, Captain. Entering optimal firing range now. Morrison took a deep breath, knowing that the next few minutes would determine not only the outcome of this battle, but the future relationship between humanity and every other species in the galaxy. The reputation that humans established here would influence every subsequent contact with alien civilizations. All weapons, commence firing. Target their flagship first, then begin systematic destruction of their entire fleet. The bridge lights dimmed slightly as the Reezes' massive power generation systems redirected energy to the weapons systems. Along the ship's 15-kilometer length, thousands of plasma cannons opened fire simultaneously, creating a wall of superheated energy that streaked across space toward the Zephyrian flagship. The first salvo struck the alien vessel with devastating effectiveness, overwhelming their defensive systems and punching through their hull armor like tissue paper. Secondary explosions erupted throughout the ship's length as the plasma beams found critical systems and began a cascade of internal damage. Direct hits on the flagship, Captain. Their defensive screens have collapsed, and I'm reading massive internal damage. Excellent. Shift targeting to the remainder of their fleet. I want all 17 vessels neutralized within the next 10 minutes. As the Reezes continued its relentless attack, Morrison realized that this battle would be remembered as the moment humanity announced its presence to the galaxy. The aliens had expected to find a primitive species ripe for exploitation, but instead they had discovered that humans were prepared to bring overwhelming force to any threat against their people. Captain, Commander Williams reported, the alien fleet is attempting to withdraw. Several vessels are powering their engines for emergency departure. Morrison considered allowing some of the aliens to escape so they could report back to their superiors about human military capabilities. The message that humanity was not to be underestimated needed to spread throughout the galaxy. Let them go, Commander. They'll serve as messengers to inform other species that humanity is not interested in being anyone's research subjects. The first salvo from the UNS Reezes lit up the darkness of space like a newborn star. Thousands of plasma bolts streaked across the void in perfect synchronization, their brilliant blue-white energy creating geometric patterns that would have been beautiful under any other circumstances. Admiral Kethvar watched from the bridge of the Sovereign's Wrath as his flagship's defensive systems attempted to process the incoming barrage, but the sheer volume of fire overwhelmed every protection protocol the Zephyrian military had developed over centuries of conquest. Defensive screens at maximum power. Subadmiral Vextar shouted over the din of alarms that filled the command nexus. Brace for impact. The plasma barrage struck the Sovereign's Wrath with the force of a dozen nuclear explosions. The ship's advanced energy shields, designed to deflect the most powerful weapons in Zephyrian arsenals, lasted exactly 2.3 seconds before collapsing entirely. The remaining plasma bolts punched through the flagship's composite armor as if it were thin aluminum, sending geysers of molten metal and atmosphere venting into space. Admiral Kethvar was thrown against his command console as the ship shuddered under the devastating impact. Emergency lighting bathed the command nexus in crimson as primary power systems failed throughout the vessel. Around him, his crew struggled to maintain their stations as reports of catastrophic damage flooded in from every section of the ship. Damage report. Kethvar demanded, his mandibles clicking with barely contained rage and growing fear. Hull breaches on decks 7 through 15, the damage control officer reported. Primary weapons systems offline. Life support failing in sections C through M. Sir, we've lost 40% of our combat effectiveness with that single salvo. Kethvar felt his exoskeleton tightening as the implications sank in. The massive human vessel had just demonstrated that it possessed firepower sufficient to cripple a Zephyrian flagship with its opening attack.
Worse, the sensors showed that the human ship had fired only a fraction of its available weapons systems.
Fleet status, he barked at Communications Officer Zekinael. 3 escort vessels completely destroyed, Admiral.
The remaining ships are reporting heavy damage and requesting immediate withdrawal.
Through the command nexus's damaged viewports, Admiral Kefvar could see the human vessel approaching at impossible speed.
The 15-kilometer Leviathan moved with the grace of a much smaller ship, its hull bristling with weapon emplacements that continued tracking targets throughout the Zephyrian fleet. The massive vessel's approach was both beautiful and terrifying, like watching a moon decide to become a predator.
"Sir," Tactical Officer announced, "the human vessel is charging what appear to be primary weapons systems.
Energy readings are off our measurement scales." Before Admiral Kefvar could respond, space lit up again as the Reezes fired its main guns. The particle beams that erupted from the human vessel's primary weapon emplacements were unlike anything in Zephyrian experience. Each beam contained enough concentrated energy to level continents, and there were dozens of them firing in perfect coordination. The Zephyrian heavy cruiser Domination's edge simply ceased to exist as one of the particle beams struck it directly. The 800-meter vessel didn't explode or break apart, it was converted into an expanding cloud of superheated plasma that briefly outshone the system's twin stars. 2 escort corvettes that had been flanking the cruiser were caught in the energy overflow and destroyed instantly, their crews having no time to realize what was happening. "By the ancestors," Sub-Admiral Vextar whispered, his compound eyes reflecting the brilliant flashes of destruction that surrounded them.
"What kind of species builds weapons like this?" Admiral Kefvar had no answer.
In 3 centuries of military service, he had witnessed the destruction of entire worlds, but he had never seen such concentrated firepower deployed with such casual efficiency. The human vessel wasn't just winning the battle, it was demonstrating that the Zephyrian fleet posed no meaningful threat to its operations.
"Navigation,"
Kefvar commanded, his voice carrying the desperation of someone watching everything he believed crumble around him.
"Emergency withdrawal. Signal all remaining vessels to scatter and retreat to the fleet rendezvous point."
"Sir, the human vessel is accelerating to intercept our withdrawal course. They're moving faster than our maximum velocity."
Admiral Kefvar watched the tactical display with growing horror as the massive human ship adjusted its course to block their escape route. The Reezes moved with predatory intelligence, cutting off retreat options while its weapons systems continued their systematic destruction of the Zephyrian fleet.
The heavy cruiser Territorial Conquest attempted to provide covering fire for the withdrawing vessels, turning its 40 plasma cannons toward the approaching human Leviathan. The Zephyrian weapons were among the most powerful in their arsenal, each capable of melting through asteroid-sized targets, but when they struck the human vessel's hull, they simply dissipated against energy shields that seemed to absorb unlimited punishment. "Their defensive systems are beyond our weapons capabilities, Admiral,"
Tactical Officer reported with obvious disbelief. "Our most powerful weapons are having no effect." The human response was swift and decisive.
A single particle beam from the Reezes struck the Territorial Conquest amidships, and the heavy cruiser broke apart in a spectacular explosion that sent debris cascading across thousands of kilometers.
Admiral Kefvar realized that the human captain wasn't even making an effort to preserve enemy vessels for study, he was simply eliminating threats with mechanical efficiency.
"Admiral," Communications Officer Zekinael turned from his station with obvious terror, "I'm receiving transmissions from the remaining fleet vessels.
They're requesting permission to surrender." The concept of surrender was largely foreign to Zephyrian military doctrine.
The hegemony's forces had spent centuries as the technological superiors in every engagement, and their tactical training assumed that retreat or negotiation would only be necessary in the face of overwhelming numerical odds. The idea that superior technology could make resistance futile had never been seriously considered. "Open a channel to the human vessel," Admiral Kefvar commanded, his pride warring with the pragmatic realization that his fleet faced complete annihilation.
"Channel open, Admiral."
Kefvar activated the communication system, his voice carrying the strain of someone admitting defeat for the first time in his career.
"Human Captain, this is Admiral Kefvar. I request immediate cessation of hostilities to discuss terms of withdrawal."
The response came back within seconds, Captain Morrison's voice carrying the cold authority of someone who held absolute tactical advantage. Admiral Kethvar, you came to this system with the intention of subjugating human colonists and treating my species as primitive research subjects.
Why should I allow any of your fleet to survive to threaten other human settlements? The question hung in space like an executioner's blade. Admiral Kethvar realized that Captain Morrison was entirely serious about the possibility of destroying the entire Zephyrian fleet. The human captain wasn't interested in traditional military victory, he was considering the complete elimination of a perceived threat to humanity. Captain Morrison, Kethvar replied carefully, the Zephyrian hegemony was unaware of humanity's advanced technological capabilities. Our standard protocols assume contact with primitive species requiring territorial administration. We meant no disrespect to your civilization. The silence that followed stretched for agonizing minutes while Admiral Kethvar watched the massive human vessel maintain its position, weapons trained on his surviving ships. Around him, his bridge crew waited for a response that would determine whether they would see another day. When Captain Morrison finally replied, his voice carried a tone that made Admiral Kethvar's exoskeleton tighten involuntarily. Admiral, your species' standard protocols involved the relocation of human civilians for study and the appropriation of our technology. These are acts of war by any civilized standard. I want you to return to your superiors with a very clear message. I am listening, Captain. Humanity is not interested in conquest or territorial expansion, but we will not tolerate threats to our people or our sovereignty. Any alien species that approaches human space with hostile intent will face the same response you're experiencing today. We prefer peaceful coexistence, but we are prepared for any alternative. Admiral Kethvar felt a mixture of relief and profound unease. The human captain was offering survival, but the terms came with implications that would reshape the Zephyrian hegemony's entire approach to territorial expansion. Captain Morrison, I will convey your message to the hegemony leadership. May I ask what guarantees my remaining vessels will be allowed to depart safely? You have my word as a representative of humanity that your surviving ships will not be attacked if you withdraw immediately and do not return to human space without explicit permission. However, Admiral, understand that this offer extends only to your current fleet. If the hegemony sends additional forces against human targets, there will be no negotiation. As Admiral Kethvar acknowledged the terms and began issuing withdrawal orders to his surviving vessels, he realized that this engagement had fundamentally changed everything the Zephyrian hegemony believed about their place in the galaxy. They were no longer the dominant technological force in their region of space, and their centuries of unchallenged expansion had come to an abrupt end. The remaining 7 vessels of the Zephyrian fleet began their withdrawal under the watchful presence of the massive human warship. As they departed, Admiral Kethvar found himself studying the sensor readings from the UNS Reezes, trying to understand how a species that appeared to possess only a primitive mining colony could have constructed such an overwhelming military asset. Sub-Admiral Vextar, he said quietly, prepare a complete analysis of this engagement for transmission to Hegemony Command. They need to understand that we have encountered a species that may be technologically superior to our own capabilities. Admiral, Vextar replied with obvious reluctance, how do we explain that a single human vessel defeated our entire fleet without sustaining meaningful damage? The question highlighted the magnitude of their defeat. The Zephyrian fleet had been designed to overwhelm any opposition through superior firepower and tactical coordination, but the humans had simply demonstrated that superior technology could render traditional military doctrine irrelevant. As the battered remains of his fleet continued their withdrawal, Admiral Kethvar realized that he would be remembered as the commander who discovered that the Zephyrian hegemony was no longer alone at the top of the galactic technological hierarchy. The humans had announced their presence in the most direct way possible, and every species in the galaxy would need to reconsider their assumptions about primitive civilizations and technological advancement. The massive human vessel maintained its position until the last Zephyrian ship had departed the system, then began returning toward the mining colony with the same mechanical precision it had shown during combat. Admiral Kethvar watched the tactical display until the human vessel disappeared beyond sensor range, knowing that he had just witnessed the beginning of a new era in galactic politics. The age of unchallenged Zephyrian expansion was over, and the humans had established themselves as a force that demanded respect through overwhelming technological superiority.
As his damaged flagship limped toward the edge of the system, Admiral Kethvar began composing the most difficult report of his military career, knowing that the hegemony's leaders would struggle to believe that a species they had dismissed as primitive had just redefined the balance of power in their region of space. Captain Morrison stood on the observation deck of the UNS Reezes, watching as the last traces of the Zephyrian fleet disappeared beyond the edge of sensor range. The massive viewport offered a panoramic view of the Kepler 442 system, its twin stars casting warm light across the mining colony below and the debris field that marked the site of humanity's first interstellar military victory. Around him, the observation deck hummed with quiet activity as crew members monitored long-range sensors and maintained communication links with Colonial Command back on Earth. Captain, Commander Williams approached from the communication station, carrying a datapad with the latest reports from the mining colony.
Dr. Chen has confirmed that all personnel are safe and accounted for.
The colonial infrastructure sustained no damage during the engagement.
Morrison nodded, though his expression remained thoughtful.
The battle had lasted less than 30 minutes from first contact to the withdrawal of surviving Zephyrian forces, but its implications would echo through human history for generations. Humanity had just announced its presence to the galaxy in the most decisive way possible, and there was no going back to the isolation that had protected Earth for millennia.
Commander, what's the status of our damage assessment?
Minimal, Captain. The Zephyrian weapons were unable to penetrate our defensive systems. Engineering reports that we expended approximately 8% of our total ammunition stores, and all systems remain at full operational capacity. The effectiveness of humanity's military technology had exceeded even Morrison's expectations. The Reezes had been designed to face unknown threats with overwhelming force, but the ease with which it had defeated a sophisticated alien military force demonstrated that human engineering had reached levels that few species in the galaxy could match. Sir, Lieutenant Commander Chen approached from her tactical station, carrying detailed analysis data from the engagement.
I've completed our assessment of Zephyrian military capabilities.
Their technology appears to be roughly equivalent to pre-Reezes human standard, with some interesting advances in propulsion and energy manipulation. Morrison accepted the datapad and reviewed the technical analysis. The Zephyrians possessed respectable military technology, but their approach to warfare appeared to rely on numerical superiority and tactical coordination rather than overwhelming individual unit capabilities. Their defeat had been inevitable once they encountered a species that approached military engineering from a fundamentally different perspective. Lieutenant Commander, I want a complete technical briefing prepared for Colonial Command. They'll need to understand exactly what we faced and how other alien species might approach future contact scenarios.
Aye, Captain. I'll have the full report ready for transmission within the hour.
As Chen returned to her station, Morrison found himself reflecting on the broader implications of humanity's first contact with an alien species. The Zephyrians had approached the mining colony with the clear intention of subjugating humanity, suggesting that aggressive territorial expansion was common among spacefaring civilizations.
If this was typical behavior, humanity would need to be prepared for additional hostile contacts in the future.
Captain, the communication officer called from his station. I'm receiving priority transmission from Colonial Command.
Admiral Harrison is requesting immediate conference. Put him through to Conference Room Alpha. Commander Williams, you have the bridge.
Morrison made his way through the Reezes' corridors toward the secure conference facility. The massive ship's interior was designed to support a population equivalent to a small city, with residential areas, research facilities, manufacturing centers, and recreational spaces distributed throughout its 15-kilometer length. The corridors bustled with activity as crew members went about their duties, but Morrison noticed that conversations had a different quality today. People were processing the reality that humanity was no longer alone in the universe.
Conference Room Alpha featured advanced holographic projection systems that allowed real-time communication across interstellar distances.
As Morrison entered, the room's systems activated and projected a life-size image of Admiral Harrison, who appeared to be standing in Colonial Command's main briefing room back on Earth. Captain Morrison, Admiral Harrison began without preamble. I've reviewed your preliminary reports of the engagement.
Is it accurate that a single vessel completely defeated a 17-ship alien fleet?
Yes, Admiral. The Zephyrian fleet possessed respectable military technology, but they were unprepared for humanity's approach to overwhelming firepower. We destroyed 10 vessels and forced the withdrawal of 7 survivors with minimal expenditure of our capabilities.
Admiral Harrison nodded grimly. Captain, I want you to understand the implications of what you've accomplished today. This engagement will fundamentally change humanity's relationship with the galaxy.
Every alien species will now know that humans possess military technology capable of decisive victory against sophisticated opposition.
Morrison had been considering the same implications throughout the post-battle analysis.
Humanity's demonstration of military superiority would serve as both protection and provocation. Some species would be deterred from aggressive action, while others might view humans as a threat requiring preemptive elimination.
Admiral, what are Colonial Command's instructions regarding future alien contacts?
The Security Council has authorized the immediate acceleration of the Deep Space Defense Program. We're bringing 12 additional vessels of the Reezes class online over the next 18 months, and we're establishing permanent patrol routes throughout human space. The scope of humanity's military expansion was staggering. Each Reezes class vessel required resources equivalent to the gross domestic product of major nations, but the Security Council was clearly committed to ensuring that humanity would never again be vulnerable to external threats.
Captain, Admiral Harrison continued, we're also implementing new protocols for first contact scenarios. Any alien approach to human space will be met by military vessels rather than civilian colonies. We can't afford to have our people caught defenseless if we encounter more aggressive species than the Zephyrians.
Morrison understood the logic behind the new protocols, but he also recognized that humanity was choosing a path that would define them as a military power rather than an exploration-focused civilization.
The decision would influence every subsequent relationship with alien species. Admiral, I should mention that I allowed 7 Zephyrian vessels to withdraw intact.
They'll serve as messengers to inform other species about human military capabilities.
That was the correct decision, Captain. We want other civilizations to understand that humanity is prepared to defend itself, but we're not interested in unnecessary aggression.
As the conference continued, Morrison found himself thinking about Dr. Chen and her team on the mining colony below. They had come to Kepler 442b to study geological formations and extract rare minerals, but their presence had triggered events that would reshape humanity's place in the cosmos. The transition from isolated Earth-based civilization to interstellar military power had happened in the space of a single afternoon.
Admiral, Morrison said, what are the long-term implications for human expansion? Will we continue colonial development, or are we shifting to a primarily military focus? Admiral Harrison's expression grew thoughtful. Captain, the Security Council has decided that humanity will pursue both objectives simultaneously.
We'll continue establishing colonies and research facilities, but every human settlement will be protected by military assets capable of deterring hostile action. The dual approach represented a massive commitment of resources and personnel, but Morrison recognized its necessity. Humanity had learned that the galaxy contained species willing to subjugate other civilizations, and isolation was no longer a viable strategy for protection.
Captain Morrison, Admiral Harrison concluded, you and the Reezes will remain on station at Kepler 442b until additional military assets arrive. We're treating this system as a strategic location for monitoring alien activity in this region of space.
As the conference ended and Admiral Harrison's image faded, Morrison remained in the conference room for several minutes, processing the magnitude of the changes that would reshape human civilization. The mining colony below represented more than just an industrial outpost, it had become the site where humanity announced its emergence as a major galactic power. Morrison returned to the bridge to find Commander Williams coordinating with the mining colony's evacuation procedures. The colonial personnel would be returning to Earth aboard the arriving UNS Endeavour, but their geological survey data would be preserved and analyzed for strategic value.
Commander, Morrison said as he resumed his position at the center of the bridge, what's the status of our long-range sensor sweeps? Captain, we're monitoring 17 sectors surrounding this system.
No additional alien contacts detected, but we're maintaining continuous observation protocols. Morrison nodded and settled into his command chair, knowing that the Reezes would serve as humanity's sentinel in this region of space for the foreseeable future.
The massive vessel's presence would serve as both a warning to potentially hostile aliens and a symbol of humanity's commitment to defending its interests. As the hours passed, reports continued arriving from various departments throughout the ship.
The engagement with the Zephyrian fleet had provided valuable data about alien military capabilities, and the crew was already analyzing the information to improve humanity's defensive strategies. Captain, Lieutenant Commander Chen approached with updated analysis from the tactical department.
I've completed our assessment of the engagement's broader implications.
Based on Zephyrian technology levels and military doctrine, we can expect that other spacefaring species will possess similar capabilities.
What does that suggest about humanity's defensive requirements?
Sir, the Reezes-class vessels should be sufficient to deter most conventional military threats. However, we may encounter species with more advanced technology or different approaches to warfare.
Morrison considered the implications of Chen's analysis.
Humanity's military superiority was based on their unique approach to overwhelming firepower, but other species might develop countermeasures or possess technologies that human engineers hadn't anticipated.
Lieutenant Commander, I want continuous analysis of all alien technology we encounter. Our advantage depends on maintaining technological superiority, and that requires constant innovation.
As the day cycle progressed aboard the Reezes, Morrison found himself walking through the ship's residential areas, observing how the crew was processing their historic role in humanity's first interstellar conflict. The conversations he overheard reflected a mixture of pride, concern, and excitement about the future. In the ship's main recreation facility, off-duty personnel gathered around holographic displays showing news broadcasts from Earth. The story of humanity's first contact with aliens was being reported across every major network, and public reaction was ranging from celebration to anxiety about future alien encounters. Morrison paused at one of the displays, listening as a news anchor discussed the implications of the battle for human civilization. The reporter was interviewing experts who debated whether humanity's military approach to first contact was appropriate or whether diplomatic alternatives might have been possible. Captain, one of the crew members noticed his presence and approached respectfully.
Sir, do you think we'll encounter more aliens like the Zephyrians?
Morrison considered his response carefully, knowing that his words would spread throughout the ship and eventually reach Earth. I think we'll encounter many different species with varying approaches to interstellar relations. Some will be peaceful, others will be aggressive, and most will be somewhere in between. Our job is to be prepared for any situation while remaining true to human values. The conversation highlighted one of the fundamental challenges humanity would face as it expanded into the galaxy. Each new contact with alien species would require careful evaluation of intentions and capabilities, and mistakes could have catastrophic consequences for human settlements throughout space. As Captain Morrison returned to his quarters at the end of the day cycle, he reflected on how completely the world had changed in the span of a few hours. Humanity had transitioned from an isolated species wondering about life among the stars to a recognized military power that other civilizations would need to consider in their strategic planning. The mining colony below continued its operations under the protection of the most powerful warship humanity had ever constructed, while throughout the galaxy, reports of the engagement would spread among alien civilizations, forever changing how they viewed the small blue planet that had suddenly announced its presence with overwhelming force. Morrison settled at his desk and began composing his detailed report for Colonial Command, knowing that his words would help guide humanity's strategy for navigating the complex realities of galactic politics. The age of human isolation was over, and the future would be determined by how well humanity balanced its defensive capabilities with its commitment to peaceful exploration and scientific advancement.